Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee meeting at CB11. My name is Jason Villanueva, and I'm the chair of the committee. The meeting is called in order at 6:35 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by Angel Muscane, the staff liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an official meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. For those on Zoom, click the participants icon and you will find the raise hand function there. If you have technical difficulties, click the chat icon and relay your difficulty to the staff. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. The chat should not be used for CB11 business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record when recognized. Please keep your questions and comments brief and on topic to the discussions. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. We will now take attendance by roll call. Committee members, please answer present when your name is called.
Adem Brehan, present. Kenneth Crouch, present. Jessica Elliott, Arnice Foster Hernandez,
Present.
Pascal Hanum,
Present.
Jewel Jones,
Present.
Nelson Orama,
Present.
Beverly Pabon, Derek Stampone,
Present.
Vinnie Torres,
Present.
Jason Villanueva,
Present.
Candy Vivas Vasquez. We have quorum.
Excellent. Adoption of the agenda. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there are no objections, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand to be recognized. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. Adoption of the meeting minutes. The minutes from our last meeting were distributed to committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there's no objection, we will adopt the minutes from the meeting from the last meeting. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand to be recognized. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the last meeting are adopted. The minutes of tonight's meeting are being taken by Kenneth Crouch. Announcements. In the interest of time, each blah, blah. Anyway, announcements. You guys got announcements? I have one announcement, just to let you know, Jessica Morris is no longer with our committee. I want to thank her for her service and the time that she spent with us. It was very informative and we thank her. Informational updates. Any other updates? No updates? Let's go. Presentation. So announcements, information, the Department of Parks. Do we want to go parks or we want to just go straight to you?
So you mean such presentations, the first thing is the museum. The first thing is the museum.
Okay. Excellent. So for presentations, we'll do 10 wing for the modern contemporary art project at the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Brett Guyard. I'm the head of capital projects at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I think, let's see if we can get our screen to be shared. Perfect. Okay. Sorry, 1 minute. We just want to make sure we get the screen up. But maybe, you know what, in the interest of time, while they're working on that, because I don't need a picture to start talking, I'll just start and then we'll get the image up on the screen. So It's nice to be with you all again. I think the last time we saw you was for our Northside Chiller Plant project and 83rd Street doors. We're really excited to be here tonight with our colleagues from the Parks Department and the Central Park Conservancy, as well as members of our design team. This is an incredibly exciting project for us and one that's been a long time in the making. It's the Tang Wing. It's our new wing for 20th and 21st century art that'll be located at the southwest corner of our campus and will replace our existing wing at that location. So in advance of our public hearing at Landmarks, which we are targeting for April 22nd, we'll be presenting to the 5 community boards surrounding the park. So we were with CB10 last night, we're with you tonight, then CB7 tomorrow, then next week CB8, and the week after that CB5. And our hope is to get 2 resolutions, one for the building and one for the landscape. We have 2 applications before Landmarks, one for the Tang Wing building and one for the landscape restoration and improvements around the building. So that's why we're here tonight with our colleagues from Central Park Conservancy and the Parks Department. The landscape scope will also go through the Public Design Commission as well. In addition, we've embarked on a full EIS process for this project. So we will have a public scoping meeting for that on April 8th. The draft scope of work for the EIS is available on the Parks Department website, and I believe we shared a copy with you as well, but if we didn't, we'll make sure that we do. Our overall schedule for the project, assuming all goes well, that's within our control, is that we aim to start construction in the summer of 2026. So, about a year and a half from now, with construction lasting approximately 3 years. And then once the building construction is complete, the landscape work will begin with a target reopening date in 2030. It takes at least a year to reinstall the art. So while we're doing that, our colleagues in the park will be doing their work. So we are, I think we have the screen up now. Is it working, Henry?
Yeah,
It's
Good
working.
to go?
It's up.
Okay. I think we can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So we have engaged with an incredibly talented design team for this project, 3 of whom are with us tonight. As with our collection of art, we're charged with caring for and adding to the Met's collection of buildings with design partners that are aligned with our mission. And so for the Met, the selection of Frida Escobedo Studio as the design architect for the project is really just a continuation of a legacy of selecting innovative and contemporary architects of their time to add to the Met's collection of architecture. So we're joined tonight by Andrea Shelley. She's the project director at Frida Escobedo Studio. In addition, we're also joined by Richard Southwick, partner at Beyer Blinder Bell Architects and Planners, who are the executive architects of the project, and they're known for their work on landmark buildings throughout New York and the world. The Met, as you all know, is not only a landmark within itself, but it sits within the work of art that is Central Park, which is also a landmark. And so we're joined tonight by the Central Park Conservancy, who are the landscape architects for the park area surrounding the wing. And Nick Koster, Vice President for Design at Central Park Conservancy, will present the landscape. We can go to the next slide, please. We are grateful for your time. We have a lot to cover. We have a lot of slides. We're going to move as quickly as we can through the presentation, but we want to show you the same presentation that we've submitted to Landmarks. So I will present an overview of why the Met is doing this project as quickly as I can. Then I'll hand it off to Richard Southwick, who will discuss the history and current conditions. Then Andrea Shelley will walk you through the proposed building design. Nick Koster will describe the landscape architecture. And then at the end, we'll walk you through views from the park that show the two combined from many different angles. We're going to try for 35 minutes. Last night we were at like 40, 45. So we'll see if we can get through a little faster tonight. We're going to do our best. So there's time for questions too. So next slide, please. Thanks, Henry. The Met has one of the finest collections of modern contemporary art in the world, but many of our visitors do not know this. Our existing wing is difficult to find, it's difficult to circulate through, and only a fraction of the square footage is actually dedicated for the display of art. So we're embarking on this project to provide appropriate gallery space to display our collection. This allows for a variety of galleries, size, and quantity of spaces. Accessibility and sustainability are part of all of our work at the Met. And this project will greatly improve the experience for our visitors, both in how they enter the wing and circulate through it. We'll also be able to dramatically reduce our energy usage at this corner of the museum by replacing the failing building envelope and all of its mechanical systems. So our hope is that this work, combined with the new landscape, will enhance and improve the relationship of the museum and the park, benefiting both the park goer and the museum goer, and provide a new contemporary addition to the Met's collection of buildings that reflects the universal nature of the Met's collection and is appropriate to its location in Central Park. Next and last slide for me, please. The most important for all of our work is our mission. That's what drives all of the work at the Met. And our mission is to collect, study, conserve, and present significant works of art across time and cultures in order to connect all people to creativity, knowledge, ideas, and one another. All the artists on this slide are in the Met's collection, and they represent a diversity of critical voices of the 20th and 21st century. These artists, as well as our collection of 20th and 21st century art, traces the emergence of New York as a cultural capital in the world, one that will continue to evolve and change. And so this is really a story of the evolution of New York. And in fact, some of the Met's founding trustees were contemporary artists of their time. So we really look forward to sharing this project with you tonight. And with that, I'll hand it over to Richard Southwick.
Thank you, Brett. Yeah, I'm Richard Southwick from Byron and Bell. This slide identifies the location in the southwest corner of the Met. We will, as shorthand, be referring to the LAW, which is short for Lila Atchison Wallace wing, which is the current modern and contemporary collection. Next. The proposal will be built on top of the existing foundation where the parking garage is now. It will have precisely the same footprint of the building that it will replace. We're going to have a two-part presentation. Andrea and I will talk about the Tang Wing and some of the context, and then Central Park Conservancy will talk about the restored landscape. Next. Next. The Met was located in the specific corner of Central Park by Frederick Law Olmsted. The first building plan was a master plan by Vox and Mold from 1872. And the first building was the current A Wing, which houses European art. And that was built in 1880. And that's all that was built of this master plan. Next. But over the years, the Met hired some of the most prominent architects in New York to do revised master plans, all very similar. Richard Morris Hunt in 1895, McKinley and White in 1906. Again, you can see in red what was built, which is just a small extent of the overall plan. Next. And as the Met built buildings to build out the master plan, they hired the most prominent architects at the time, and that resulted in a whole diversity of architectural styles, as you can see, from Victorian to Greek Revival to international style. Next. The Met it's a living institution. It's always changing because the program needs are always changing. A McKinley and White design library and auditorium were both removed for the Watson Library we know now and the Grace Rainey Rogers Library. Both giving much more capacity for those needs. Probably the most prominent change was the front steps that were designed by Richard Morris Hunt when approximately 1 million visitors walked up those steps. Kevin Roach in his first project at the Met did a much larger set of steps when the visitation was close to 5 million people at the time. Next. Landmarks recognized all this, and this quote from the 1967 designation report, one of the most notable monumental structures remaining in the city, designed by the eminent architects reflecting diverse architectural styles. And they recognize that as an asset of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Next. This is the outline of the museum at the time of designation, flanked by 2 large parking lots to the south and north. The main entrance, as we know, on Fifth Avenue, and then a secondary entrance in the park on the southwest corner. Next. Come the 1960s, the Met was celebrating its centennial, and to look towards the future, they wanted to do a new master plan, and they hired Kevin Roach to put that together. Kevin Roach is very well known for buildings that integrated the landscape and buildings, and this is a view of the Oakland Museum that was being completed at the time. And Louis Huxtable wrote in the New York Times that it's a potential breakthrough in museum design. Next. And a little bit closer to home, the Ford Foundation was being completed at about the same time. Thomas Hoving, the director of the Met at the time, was very aware of these buildings and wanted to bring Kevin Roach on board. Roach worked very closely with Dan Kiley, the very noted landscape architect. Next. There are a couple key concepts in Roach's plan. One, he wanted to complete his master plan, which is very similar to the earlier ones, by having a alternating series of limestone and glass volumes. The visitor circulation was clarified by having clear paths of circulation through. He utilized daylight as a wayfinding tool to provide the destinations within the museum, and wanted to enhance relationship to Central Park, particularly in the glass volumes where you had good views out to the park. Next. And over the next 20 years, his master plan was essentially completed, starting with first building project, the Lehman Wing in 1975, ending with Petrie Court in 1991. And right next to that, you see the our project site, LAW, which was completed in 87. Interestingly, that was planned for European art in 1971 in the master plan. Modern contemporary was a later thought to include that in that building. Next. And here you see the three master plans overlaid. Roach Dinkley's 1971 in the bright red line. The two earlier ones were both basically the same size, but just a little bit larger than where Kevin Roach ended up in his final plan. Next. We're going to talk a bit about the LAW wing and how that works currently for the Met's modern contemporary collection. Next. This is what it looks like from the exterior. Fairly tall, blank limestone walls. Next. It's interesting to compare the American wing and LAW. From the exterior, they're very similar. They form the corners of the northwest and the southwest corners of the Met. But on the interior, they're very, very different. The American wing, built in anticipation of the American bicentennial, was a series of period rooms and very well-designed and programmed spaces to meet that collection. LAW, on the other hand, was really originally programmed for European art. It's not really designed, and was not as good of a fit for the modern contemporary collection. Next. Comparing the sections through the American wing and LAW, the tan or brown color is the permanent collection. The American wing had a very high percentage of the space devoted to galleries. On the other hand, LAW was a mashup of a lot of different functions. Smaller amount of gallery space, a much lower percentage. There's a lot of back of house, public amenities, offices, all put into the same volume. Next. And Kevin Roach, after the fact, realized that this was probably the least successful of his parts of the Met that he designed. It never got, this is a quote from an oral history project, never got built properly. I was never very happy with what happened. It wasn't a clear program. It kind of just got put together in pieces. Next. There are a number of defects that just don't work well. I'm going to focus on just a few. There are a series of skylights you can see in the right-hand photograph facing west with what would allow light to penetrate deep into the galleries, and that can't happen because it's detrimental to the artwork. There's shades of the skylights. Those are always deployed. There's a lot of condensation, it's damaging finishes, and the low wall at the base of the skylights just limits what can be displayed in those very large spaces. Next.
Another
Another main objective is to make the entire museum accessible, and that's one of the main goals in this project. A large mezzanine gallery has no accessibility, and for a visitor who's mobility impaired, they need to find a staff member. It's almost a 2-block walk from the galleries back to the closest elevator, and then back to the gallery again. So it's one of the things that just doesn't work. It needs to be remedied. Next. As Brett talked about both sustainability goals and the inadequate performance of LAW. A new wing could improve energy consumption by 45% and over time have a lower carbon footprint than it does currently. Now, next. Finally, Roach really knew that museums change. This is a quote of how it needs to continue to grow, it needs flexibility, it has to change going into the future. And he recognized that these are living museums, and their change is inevitable. Next. So I want to set up Andrea, who's going to talk about the proposal, but these are some of the kind of facts of that design and some of the goals as well. The new Tang wing will occupy the same footprint as existing wing, being no taller than the adjacent Kravis wing. It really maintains the scale of the overall building forms throughout the museum. Continues the use of limestone as a corner definition. It will enhance the visual connections to Central Park, which are now fairly non-existent, and will very importantly better accommodate the modern and contemporary collection. Will achieve full accessibility and lower energy use. This weaves a new wing into the overall master plan with what will be a universal architectural style that Andrea will talk about. And what I find fascinating, it represents this next chapter in the Met's long time tradition of engaging very prominent contemporary architects. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Andrea to talk about the design.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, I'm Andrea Shelley with Frida Escobedo Studio. I'm the project director with the studio for the Tang Wing. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Next. The Met, as it is today, is actually a collection of 21 individual buildings which have been constructed over 100 years. Next. The existing campus is really experienced like one would experience a medieval town, a collection of narrow streets and open plazas that are stitched together in a sort of Byzantine organization. Next. The existing wing sits at a crucial crossroads curatorially between very important pieces of the Met's collection. The proposed wing will sit on the same footprint as Richard was describing, the existing foundation walls is the existing LAW wing today. But through our interventions, we would like to open up new curatorial potentials within the new modern and contemporary collection. Next. Our practice at Frida Escobedo Studio is one which draws inspiration from historic layering of all kinds. Here we have a few examples that we have pinned up in the studio. The bottom left is an example in Mexico City, another example in New York City, and another example from Athens. And we look at the way that space is layered at thresholds and different scales create these very rich tapestries that we experience in all of these major metropolises. Next. There are many examples of historic layering at the Met. On the left, you see an image of Petrie Court, which is the Kevin Roche intervention, which is part of the master plan, stitching together the existing Vox original Met entrance on the left, on the, image right, and then on the left, you see Kevin Roche's addition. And then on the bottom right, you see an example of an unfinished cornice of the Beaux-Arts Fifth Avenue facade at the Met. It's just another example of the way the Met is always evolving. It's never fully finished. And this is just sort of a magical example of that. Next. Frida Escobedo and our practice in general also draws inspiration from many geographic locations and art and architecture over millennia. So on the left, you see an image of handcrafted block, which in aggregate forms this beautiful stepped mass, monumental mass. And on the right, you see two examples of Annie Alber's work. She used warp and weft to create a sense of rhythm and composition and movement in her work, which is something that we aim to do as well. Next. We also draw upon architectural languages that are universal. So here we have 3 examples of something called a celosia, which is a screen, an architectural screen, which allows light and air into a facade. It also creates a sense of texture and porosity in these buildings. Next. This is a rendering of the proposed Tang Wing from the northwest corner. We really designed the massing in response to Central Park and in response to the existing campus, using a stepped recessive mass to allow continuous sky views from key vantage points in the park, but also to correlate to the existing adjacent wings. Next. So in reality, the western facade of the Met is really only experienced episodically, meaning that as you move through the park, you never see the full western elevation as a single composition. Rather, you see it from key vantage points and corners, really. So these are a few images of the path with which circumambulates the immediate western facade of the Met. Next. These are 2 elevations of the southern facade of the Met. The top is the existing LAW wing, and on the bottom is the proposed Tang Wing. And you can see that we are working very hard to create these synergies between the existing campus and getting these key alignments. We will not build any higher than the existing adjacent machine room, which occupies what we refer to as the U wing, and significantly lower than the Great Hall Ridge. Next. And here we are on the western facade. Again, you can see those key alignments, which we are aiming to achieve with the existing campus. And here too, you can see that adjacent machine room, which is the top elevation of our proposed wing. Next. These are sightline diagrams. One on the top is the north-south section views from the park, and on the bottom is an east-west section, both from the park and Fifth Avenue. The red lines indicate viewpoints from human eye height, both from within the park, along East Drive and the path immediately adjacent to the western facade, and from Fifth Avenue. And you can see that we're using this recessed mass to allow this clear view of the sky from these very important moments within the park. Next. Returning to the Roche-Dinkeloo master planning concepts, Kevin Roche used a sort of modulated volume with juxtaposing glass and stone to emphasize corners, and then using the glazed facades as the connective tissue between these stone volumes. So here you see a diagram with the stone corners as they are today, shown in taupe, and then the glass volumes shown in blue, and then of course the existing campus as it was at the time of the master plan in 1971 shown in red. Next. The proposal for the new Tang Wing will create a real connection with the existing campus through the use of materiality. Nearly all of the existing campus, save for the Roche interventions, are built with Indiana limestone, a sandblasted Indiana limestone. So we have an example of the McKim Mead and White facade on the left, the Kevin Roche facade, which is the existing LAW wing there in the center, which is also sandblasted limestone. And we propose to use a belt sawn limestone which has a very similar tone and texture as the existing limestone, juxtaposed with moments of split face limestone for additional texture at key moments, which we will describe momentarily. This is a rendering of the proposed celicea facade, which you will find around the proposed Tang wing. The purpose of the celicea here is to provide interaction and views inside and outside, from within the wing and out to the park, but also to create a sense of scale, rhythm, and movement around the facade. Next. Another one of the Roche-Dinkeloo master planning concepts was this idea of a complete circulation loop. So the red solid lines indicate these achieved circulation loops through each of the wings. And then you can see that Roche proposed a circulation loop through what is now the modern and contemporary, once the European wing there, which was unrealized. Next. Through our analysis of the existing circulation, you see in the dark poche blocks, those represent egress stairs, elevator cores, and some mechanical spaces, which really form a crust around the existing perimeter of the wing, preventing any kind of real interaction and engagement with the park beyond. So what we propose is to consolidate those cores into 2 cores, freeing up the perimeter zone to enable this complete circulation loop around the proposed wing. And here is a diagram showing that completed circulation loop in red. And you can see in the proposed plan on the upper left corner how that is achieved. The existing campus is punctuated by moments of double and triple height connections to daylight, which is something we will return to in our proposal. Next. And here we have a rendering of the existing Petrie Court Cafe on the left, and then the proposed connection into the new Tang wing on the right. Next. Here again, one of the master planning concepts, as I mentioned previously, these connections to daylight and these moments of elevated ceiling height for those very important visual connections to the park beyond. Next. And in the proposal for the new Tang wing, we will provide these similar opportunities for double height galleries with connections to the park beyond. Next. A couple of renderings of those, the Northwest Gallery on the left with views to Central Park. We're working with our colleagues at Central Park Conservancy to design the landscape immediately around the wing. And then a view of one of what we call the celicea galleries here, showing that sort of modulated view in and out to the Central Park. Next. So we have 2 sections here. The upper section shows continuous floor plates and solid red lines extending from the existing campus into our wing. And then below you see blue lines. These indicate portions of the floor plates which we have pushed up or down to create taller and more appropriate gallery ceiling heights. Next. And then 2 sections here, Richard touched on this briefly earlier. You see the existing programmatic distribution on the upper section and the proposed programmatic distribution on the lower section. The upper section illustrates this myriad collection of programs that are currently in the LAW wing, and we, through relocating those programs to other parts of the museum, have been able to create larger concentrations of gallery space. Next. This is a reflected ceiling plan diagram showing a variety of ceiling heights and a variety within a range which is appropriate to modern and contemporary art, which is not achievable in the current LAW wing. Next. And here we have 2 renderings, one of a typical sort of white box gallery. And then on the right, we have a very special space on the 5th floor. This would be a gallery which engages with the park and the Manhattan skyline beyond. And this would be an opportunity for New Yorkers to get a year-round access to views that they've come to expect from the existing cantor roof today, but available not just seasonally, but all of the time, and with art which is curated in support of this very unique moment. Next. So the next section of the presentation are a series of drawings and details which illustrate further thinking in depth about how we will build the new wing. I won't dwell on these too long here, but so we'll just quickly run through them. This is an axonometric drawing showing the different materials that we will use on the facade. As I mentioned previously, is primarily Indiana limestone. But what you see here also is the fourth floor terrace, which will have the changing exhibitions like the Cantor Terrace does today. But on the fifth floor, we will offer a beautifully landscaped new terrace, which will not just provide important moments of shade and respite from the campus inside, but also moments of reflection and potential education opportunities. Next. This is a rendered elevation of one of the facades of the proposed Tang Wing. The important thing here is that we are changing the scale of the stone modules as you move vertically up the facade to create different kinds of engagement at different heights of the building. So at the park level, it's a more urban scale, experienced more from a distance. And then on the upper levels is a much smaller scale module that is experienced one-to-one as people move around the terraces. And then here we have a series of rendered elevations and sections showing the construction details for these various systems. We could just move through these quickly. This is interesting because it's a planned detail of some of those Celicea moments. The individual modules are actually angled to allow the maximum amount of view out while controlling and limiting the amount of light that comes inside to protect the art. Next. There will be a stair, a public stair connecting public within the museum, connecting the fourth and fifth floor terraces, providing yet another completion of that circuit inside and outside. Next. There will be a minimal amount of remedial work done to the existing Petrie Court facade, in part due to a shift of the art movement path from outside in the park to the interior, and we will replace in kind the existing system, matching those existing profiles very closely. Next. And here we have a sort of aerial view, bird's eye view of the southwest corner and the proposed Tang Wing. And here I'll pass it to my friend Nick Koster from Central Park Conservancy. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Koster, as Andrea mentioned, presenting on behalf of the Central Park Conservancy for the design of the landscape around the Tang Wing. If we could go to the next slide. We wanted to start with the goals for this landscape project, which are enhancing the park user experience through accessibility, refining the landscape quality and character, and improving the park and museum interface. Next, please. With all the work that we do at the Conservancy, we like to understand the history of the landscape within the context of the park. So this is a plan of Olmsted and Vaux's winning design for the Greensward plan as shown. Actually, when originally designed, did not have provisions for large public structures in the landscape. Next, please. And as Richard mentioned earlier, in 1872, Olmsted and Vaux provided guidelines for the addition of the Met Museum within the park in this location for specific reasons. Situated between the former reservoir wall, it was also located between two of the sunken transverse roads that bisect the park and the Fifth Avenue street edge. Next. And as you've seen through the slides in the architectural presentation, the building was added onto many times since its establishment, and the park landscape around the museum also continued to evolve with the additions and modifications. For example, like the obelisk and changes to the park circulation. Next. However, in the 1930s, the relationship of the museum and the surrounding park landscape was significantly altered, and that was with the removal of the receiving reservoir. And in its place, the Great Lawn was created, which removed the barrier that connected the park to the landscape around the Met, ultimately really changing the relationship of the park to the museum building. Next. Not all of the changes after the creation of the Great Lawn were for the better of the landscape. And in the 50s, a parking lot was added to replace the former carriage drop-off. Next. The Roche Dinkaloo Master Plan for the museum and the expansion that happened, we've heard quite a bit about in the presentation, and that really created the extent of the Met footprint in the park that we're familiar with today. Next, in the 1980s, the New York City Parks Department prepared a landscape master plan for the entire landscape around the Met to address planting, park circulation, and some of that master plan was implemented in the 1990s by the Central Park Conservancy. One of those big moves was moving the playground, which you're seeing in this image, closer to the park perimeter. Next. So here we have an aerial of what the site is today, and I'm now going to quickly walk you through some photos to show the existing site conditions. So the existing landscape, it's primarily lawn with a few trees that berm up, or a few trees that are in the berm of the building. As we go around, there's a pinch point at the corner of the building with a steep slope and a compacted lawn. Next, the west side features an evergreen screen that is a bit out of character with other park landscapes. Next, the loading access from the park, it's not very well integrated. This is a view towards the Petrie Court, which Andrea spoke about the facade work. And next, this is a photo across the drive that shows the asphalt access path that cuts through the planting and creates desire lines from park users through other landscapes in the park. Next. So, one thing that we've thought a lot about with the landscape design is the views from the adjacent landscapes of the park. And, those will also be impacted by this work. And it's important that we are thinking about the landscape in all seasons. Next. Before we jump into the design, we just wanted to show you some examples of the landscape character of other areas of the park that we'll be implementing with the new design. Next, we're looking, back one. Looking to create seasonal interest and adding an understory, define lawns, and increasing biodiversity with our plant selections. Next. So a short series of diagrams that highlight the landscape design. So one of the big moves that we're doing is relocating the path a bit to the south, and that really relieves that pinch point that was shown in the photo between the park and the building. By doing this, we're also going to be able to regrade it and create ADA access along that path, which will extend all the way from Fifth Avenue up to the Great Lawn. Next. So in addition to relocating the path, it's going to allow for us to regrade this landscape and create a better relationship between how the museum wing meets the park and allow for relocating of that loading access drive away from the edge of the building at the Petrie Court. Next. In regard to the planting, we have 15 design-related tree removals that are part of the project, as well as 2 transplants noted with the T. We're proposing to plant between 40 and 50 new trees as part of the design. Next. So in addition to the tree planting, we'll be planting a diverse understory, very characteristic of those 4 photos that we looked at a little bit earlier. Those will be planted around the building that will really add that layer of visual interest, creating habitat, something that really didn't previously exist within this landscape. And finally, just a series of sections working around the building from north to south. We're showing the planting design in all of these at about 10 to 15 years maturity in all the sections. So at this one, this is taken through the window at the southern corner. It's really highlighting the changes to the grading and the planting. Next. This one's a bit further down, cut through at Gray Wacky Arch. And next, on the southern facade, this is closer to the corner, showing the relocated path, which moves away from the building to create the ADA accessible path and the planting and grading updates. So in addition to the typical planting palette that we've showed today, we'll be using fairly standard park materials for the palette, asphalt paths, settee benches, pipe rail fences. One new material that we'll be introducing is a reinforced lawn surface, which will go into that location of the loading access drive that we showed you the photo of. So I'm now going to turn it back to the Met team, and Andrea is going to walk through building views taken from the park.
Thank you. Yes, here you see an aerial photo of the Met, and you see little dots with the numbers, and those can indicate the views that we will walk through. So they're from the path, which is immediately around the existing campus, and then East Drive and further out in the park, and Fifth Avenue, of course. Next. So here we're starting on Fifth Avenue, and in each of these series of images, you'll see the existing LAW wing photo on the left, and then on the right, you'll see the same photo with the proposed wing photoshopped in, sort of rendered in, and the red dashed line indicates the perimeter or the profile of either the existing or proposed, and they will not align between images because one is existing and one is proposed. Next. Here is a view from the existing parking entrance along Fifth Ave. And here we are again, still on Fifth Avenue on the sidewalk, moving into the path. Here we are walking on the path toward the southwest corner of the museum. And here we are, this is the south facade, existing on the left, proposed on the right. And here we are a little bit further back on the path, the southern facade again, existing on the left, proposed on the right. And all of these views are winter views, except for the last couple we'll show you are in the summertime. But the purpose of that is to show the sort of worst case scenario because many of the plants are deciduous, obviously. Next. And here we are on Cedar Hill, a little bit farther away, existing on the left, proposed on the right. And again, still on Cedar Hill, but on the path, that southwest corner, looking east, yes, and here we are, the southwest corner again, a little bit further away. Next. And then here we are on East Drive, a little bit closer, and you really begin to see that stepped massing moving away from you in space. Next. And then the western facade, you can see that northwest corner, the glazed lower portion there was the same interior rendering view that we showed previously. Next. And then the northwest corner from Cleopatra's Needle, looking toward the south. Next. And then here we are, a summer view. And from this vantage point, much of the building is obscured by the plant growth. Next. And here we are in East Drive, again in the wintertime. This is the northwest corner. Next. And then here we are on the path approaching that northwest corner, and you can really see the profiles clearly here. And then this is a sort of a drone view of the proposed wing, and you can see the 4th and 5th floor terraces shown very clearly here. We're working with Nelson Bird Woltz for the design of the landscape on the 4th and 5th floor terraces. So that is the conclusion of our presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Brett?
Thanks, Andrea. I think we're available for questions. We can leave the presentation up on the screen or take it down, whichever you prefer.
You can take it down, thank you.
Okay.
It was submitted to us for record, so we'll put it up on our website, and forgive me, the Airtable is the name of the system we use? Yeah, so, all right, thank you for your presentation. Do any committee members have any questions? Jessica, then Beverly?
Just a really quick question. Thank you so much, everyone, for your presentation. It's great to hear about the great work that you all are doing. And I just had a quick question about the trees. There were 2 trees marked for transplant, and it seems like that was it out of the trees. Just curious why some of those larger, more mature trees aren't able to be transplanted anywhere else, and what happens to those?
Yeah, so no, so yeah, 2 are for transplant, and then the other I believe 13 that we have, they're going to be removed as part of the design. So they're of a larger caliper size, so you know, very difficult to move. We've been actually looking at we've been meeting and talking with nurseries about larger tree sizes that are available, that are out there now, that as the project progresses, that we can actually go out and tag some trees that are of a size that still can be shipped to the park on a truck and installed, that are larger, just, you know, knowing that we don't want to put anything in too small. But you know, it's something that we've looked at, and it's really those that fit the size criteria. But we have been looking at and speaking with a local vendor who does do tree reuse within the city. So that's something that, you know, as we are just now in design development, we'll be able to explore over the course of the next year as the project progresses.
Thank you.
Beverly.
This is my same question about the trees,
Great
because
line.
there's so many of them. And just to have 2 of them transplant, I was also concerned about the trees.
I promise you all, the Department of Parks, regardless of the city agency, plays no games when it comes to trees. Which is a great comment that's been brought up. Is anyone from Parks on the line from CB11? The Parks Committee? If not, it's okay, we'll proceed. I know Parks was notified, Economic Development and Culture Committee was notified. If I don't have no comments, I don't see no concern, unless members want to present.
Yeah, and we do have a representative from the Parks Department with us, if any questions are specific to them.
Thank you, I'm sorry, I was just talking about for the board.
Okay,
First.
understood.
Just to clear it up. Nilsa?
Yes, I just had a question, pardon me, I'm half blind, regarding the terraces. What is it, the 4th and 5th floor, I believe? I may
Yes.
have the wall. Is there some kind of barrier, or is it just, you know, you just walk out and God forbid, someone can just.
Yeah. No, there's definitely a substantial, it's a balustrade. It's actually 48 inches tall, so it's 4 feet, which is higher than the code minimum. And we're working very carefully with the Met to discourage people from approaching that edge as much as possible. But yes, there's a substantial barrier, and it's tall.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, because I'm sorry if I missed it in the picture. I
We
may not
know,
have it.
we went through those sections very quickly.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members? Public? Okay, so just one last comment, the Department of Parks and Recreation will hold a public scoping meeting. I should have read this in the beginning, I didn't connect it, apologize. A public scoping meeting for the proposed Tang Wing for Modern Art and Contemporary Art Project on April 8th, 2025, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. The purpose of the scoping meeting is to provide the public with the opportunity to comment on the draft scope of work proposed to be used to develop the environmental impact statement for this project. To register to attend, the website is on our agenda. I'm pretty sure it's up on, I'm sorry, the Metropolitan Museum of Art's website. I saw another link to another website relevant to another city agency with parks, so there's more than enough information publicly being provided for the project. So I will now go back to Nilsa, and then we can close and decide how we would like to proceed.
I'm sorry, something just popped in regarding the trees. Like, I remember at one point, I'm not quite sure if that's changed. When you removed one tree, you had to replant a certain number of trees. Does that affect this project at all based on the number of trees that may be removed? And if so, how many trees are being replaced for each tree that will be removed?
Yeah, so we're working with the Parks Department to figure out that that value. We don't have the calculations done yet, but we're looking at between 40 and 50 that will be going in at a fairly large size. So I don't have the calculations yet, but we're following all of the city rules regarding tree restitution for this project.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Seeing no more questions, comments or concerns, we could proceed. Are we looking for a letter of support at this committee meeting, or we're expecting it by next committee?
So I think, and please colleagues jump in, we are looking for a letter of support. We're actually looking for two, one, because we have two separate applications before landmarks, one for the building, one for the landscape. And I think that comes typically from your executive committee, if I'm correct. But our public hearing is April 22nd, so we're hoping that it will be after this series of meetings that we can go to landmarks.
Right, so does it sound accurate that we could wait till next month?
We could do it next month, but we'd have to go to the executive next month. There
Right.
wouldn't be enough time to ratify it full board before they need it. So we could do it by executive.
Okay. Only given because it's a fairly large scale, I'm sorry, was it Natalie, right? In
I'm
comparison
Brett.
to the other-
Yeah.
Brett? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's okay.
I guess whoever filed this was, I got it. So Brett, it just to give the public space, opportunity to opine. I have heard no concerns to date. Again, this has been out bulleted to all our members and chairs. And if any committee I would personally be concerned of in my experience is the Parks Committee, and we've heard nothing to date. Some of the members are already crossing on this. So if you could wait till next month, I think it's fair and reasonable.
Yeah, I think I'm hoping one of my colleagues knows the answer to this. I think we just need to get that letter into landmarks by a certain date. I'm not sure when your meeting is
Yeah,
next
Brett,
month.
I
Oh,
believe.
Diane, you would know.
Okay, Diane.
Hi, I'm Diane Jack here. I'm from the Central Park Conservancy. As long as we get that letter to the Landmarks Commission by the hearing on April 22nd, that's all that we need.
Yeah, I think it might need to be there the Friday before when they put the full package together, but it's just around the date of the.
They can,
Yeah.
they can,
Yeah,
they can read it at the hearing. That's all they
Right.
need.
right.
It's not an issue. I just, like I said, there's a public session coming up. I would like to provide any opportunity for those to be able to make comments. And, you know, it just seems that there's other projects coming down the pipe for the museum. And we just try to maintain a 30 to 60 day opportunity for members to review the project, for the public to review it. Last thing you would want is an outcry at your LPC meeting, if that makes any sense.
We
Though
agree. We're totally fine with that.
Yeah, I don't see no issue. I haven't, like I said, I've had no comments. If anything, there's been support for the project. A few local CBOs have reached out to CB11 asking to provide testimony to your project. So I don't have that yet, so I have to give them the opportunity to, for lack of a better word, to provide that by full board, if that makes sense.
Understood. And if you need more information from us in the meantime too, we're happy to provide that. I think the draft scope of work is pretty thorough, but if you need a memo or a summary, whatever you need, we can get that for you.
The presentation was very thorough, so.
Yeah, sorry, it was long. We tried to go as fast as we could.
You did an excellent job. We look forward to the drawings and all the other stuff that comes from it, when the project is released. So,
Okay.
good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. So the second presentation on our agenda is land use application, the 132 East 125th Street Transit Easement Project. I believe it's an update.
No, it's just committee discussion unless Jose wants to say something from DC. There's no presentation.
Okay, excellent. Any concerns, questions?
So I did reach out to the MTA to confirm whether they would be required, whether an easement was required. They confirmed that yes, indeed there was. Which is what ultimately is required by this process, the certification from the MTA and CPC ultimately. So that information was able to be verified by the MTA.
Thank you, Angel. Any other questions or concerns from the members? I know this was a topic of discussion a month or two ago, so. All right, we addressed it. Thank you. Moving on. Old business. So just so you know, the HPD, well, I said this probably informally at the beginning of the meeting, but my first time seeing how HPD provided formal responses for the ULIP application relevant to Carmen Villegas. I think they did a very thorough job addressing concerns that were brought forth by the community. A a part of this committee as well as that which was described at the board. Some concerns about preference that was addressed. The project is you could clean up my terminology. It's a free for non-preferential project. It's for seniors. That's the interest of it. That's pretty much where we're at. We talked at it in ad nauseam. I personally don't need another presentation. I think they did a real good job on full board, so I'll open it up to discussion to vote as it relates to land use applications. I will not read out the numbers. They're on your agenda. Carmen Diego's apartment, senior citizens, senior housing, and I open the floor for discussion prior to taking the vote. Yeah.
So I wanted to highlight the response to question 12. That was something that we had a little bit of back and forth with them on the day. And I was encouraged to see that they're saying that if the person is in the unit, they don't have to meet the age requirement. So in the apartment, I thought that was like a really good thing. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up, which they somewhat addressed in number 2.
Can we finish with 12 real quick?
Sure.
I think that just to open it, so I know there's a concern about multiple members have brought up concerns with succession rights. It says right here that there is not, if it's follows the New York State law, there's no issue. I'm pretty sure we'll have questions or comments later on for those that support senior housing, that this may be an issue for that. Right, the whole intention of this facility is so that it could provide senior housing, but I know that there was members concerned and they used NYCHA housing as an example to do this comparison. So the answer was provided with similar. I don't think there's any further comment on that unless somebody has a concern. Housing, human services.
I mean, your concern, my concern is what you just said. I get the whole need for succession, but I also can see how this could eventually turn into no senior housing. I mean, in a long scale thing, so it kind of is a double-edged sword, right? It's good in one way, maybe not so good in the other, but other than that, I think it's a great project. That's just, you're not gonna make everybody's not gonna be made happy. That's the problem.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it was
continue.
worth thinking about like, if you were living there with your spouse and then were thrown out.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, yeah.
And then another one that came up was around the stability of federal funding supporting projects like this. And I think some stuff has come out in the news since this presentation. And so the response in question 2, I think is encouraging, but still not exactly the answer perhaps you would have wanted to see, but that's outside of our ability to do something. But it is, I hope more conversations are happening at the city level, thinking about what will happen to these projects if money is available.
I would look at number, he's talking about question number 2. I would also look at number 11. As it may serve purposes, particularly to the housing advocates within the board. Not necessarily relevant to the land use application, because again, we're showing a lot of interest in the project, but it's something for those that are concerned about housing and financing projects for a later date. And I'll probably emphasize the last 2 sentences of that answer. Anybody else? No more questions? Comments? Excellent. Take a vote. The resolution was provided to all members prior to the committee. I have heard no comments. I've had no responses, no written concerns or questions. So I will now entertain a motion for the resolution that is provided prior to committee. I recognize Candy.
I motion to accept the recommendation of the land use application. I'm gonna be going or just,
No.
no, okay. For the Carmen Diego's apartment, senior housing.
Do I have a second?
With the conditions.
Did they accept the conditions? You wanna read all the conditions?
It was written out in the resolution, and the resolution was provided written as part of the agenda, so, I mean, we could.
Number 113.
Yeah, it's more than enough.
Well,
Yeah, well, they're not all conditions, those are where our
Right.
resolved, but
Right.
if we want to emphasize the conditions, we could, it doesn't hold. It won't affect the vote.
So you wanna
Unless you guys argue it at full board, right?
No, we're not.
Oh, I've seen it with you.
I know. No, this project, I am fully wholeheartedly supporting it.
We should read it out, just, because nobody else inside us has this, right?
It was part of the agenda, it'll be in the minutes, I mean,
It'll be on the website.
yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah, I need a second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Any present not voting? The motion carried. Unanimous. Thank you all for your.
Congratulations, guys.
Thank you so much for your great work.
All right,
Thank
moving on.
Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you all at the full board. Thanks for your support. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Any new business? Any old business? All right, I just want to make a general comment to the members. If there's any concerns relevant to the meeting minutes, relevant to the agenda, I believe, and I'm gonna take this probably a little further than most would say, that I am very available as a chair. I think that, I don't know where your other committee chairs are, and with respect to them, I would just ask that prior to sending out notice to staff and sending out notice to our board chair, if it's political, that's your own incentive. But if it addresses the concerns that are being brought forth by this committee, out of respect as your chair, I ask that you come to your chair, right? Because it provides opportunity, one, for me to be clear in understanding your concern. And more importantly, sometimes it's hard for us to hear it, especially as adults, the word no, right? Sometimes I understand we have our agenda, our concern, a particular situation, a scenario that we want interest of. And like I said, I believe we're in full support of that. It's just unfortunate that we only have, there's 50 of us and there's 3 staff members, right? So I always push for us to volunteer to work harder for our staff as they already do, right? So there isn't a specific situation and scenario, but over the course of the year, I have seen more emails go direct to our staff liaison as opposed to your chair, right? And that just creates muddy confusion, if that makes sense, right? Because if it's a board item, a general item, I have no issue with it. But if it's a land use item, I only request some diplomacy, some conversation. And you all have my number. The board doesn't pay for it, I promise you, it's my number. So I just wanted to say that because sometimes we push for our response for a particular item and we sidetrack the agenda of what we're trying to do for the community. And as you can see, I can promise you in my past experience, a land use application that was just reviewed as it was today, it took us 5 years to get to this point where we could collectively trust, work, and understand one another, right? I used to be a part of the other side of the fence of watching this, and there was more debates and arguments at committee than there was discussion, right? So I'm trying to keep that going. So if, again, I'm open always. If you see a concern, if I'm error, if I'm flawed, if I'm not listening, you could do it in private and it's also your right to do it in public, right? I am not above no rule. So I just wanted to share that because, like I said, I've seen a few issues come through the communications and it's not being ignored. It's not priority, right? We're land use. So it's land use, landmarks, and then preservation. And then I could chase, example given, housing issues, right? Which we're lucky because we have the chair of housing on our committee, right? So, it's a blessing. There's a lot of blessings in disguise there. And I just wanted to say that before we close today. So I don't have anything else. If there's no other further business, I do see we have some members of the public. The public like to say anything? Or we welcome you.
Partnerships with the organizations and so on. So we wanted to, participate in your
Excellent, welcome. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
For being here.
My name is Mark Villegas. I'm new to the neighborhood, not moving from far, we moved from Central Harlem to East Harlem, originally from Queens. I lived in Dallas prior, and was very involved in sort of local politics out of like, a little bit out of guilt, because I realized, you know, I moved into a predominantly Mexican-American neighborhood. And I looked like the folks, but I realized I was the gentrifier in that thing. More active in my professional world. I work at a foundation, in grant making around housing work. So do a lot of, we fund things like community land trust. We fund things around vouchers. So that's what I do in my professional base. But in my personal, in my life, I was like, you know what, like, I should get more involved because I think it's important. And partly because like when you come to East Harlem, like there's a lot of, it looks like old New York, right? But it's not old New York because a lot of the sort of the underutilized and sort of lack of maintenance isn't because there isn't, before it was because it was actually abandoned, but now it's actually because folks are actually holding on to it, for whatever reason that they're holding it on to. Now my specific reason that I come is because behind us, there's a church.
I got your email.
Yeah, so.
And our response was to you was that we'll discuss that next month.
Yeah, so perfect,
Yes.
that, and it's more learning, like how to, and I get it also as well, like I also know like. There's processes, it's not landmark, there may be little I can do or not do, but at least I wanna be on the record, right? That like, it's been on the record before, and then there's a new person who wants to put it on the record, and just be active in community.
So I'm sorry, just for widespread, there's a concern with a particular application of an existing church building that's being demolished. It's being brought to our attention. We'll discuss it next month. But I do implore you to start your research now. I will forward you the email that I received from this gentleman and start seeing what concerns, if any, are being raised by the board. And yes, we could get into the semantics of as of right, where are they able to do it, not do it, as could no different than probably what happened with the bank. And I need not say that again. Conflict aside, we know Jason is a Christian. I'm very open about that, so we'll continue to have that conversation. Yes.
I was just gonna say, unfortunately, you're 3 business days late for applying for the community board, but we would hope that you would, look into that for the future, and you're more than welcome to consider applying as a public member, if you'd like to get involved. with the board.
Yeah, I think it's good to observe first.
Yeah,
before-
oh, absolutely, completely agree.
I've been chair for 4 years and we haven't had a public member in land use, so if you attend more than 2 meetings, you'll have a really good chance. I go Boston for being, especially for bringing the youth, which is very important, right? Because if we don't say nothing, someone else will, and they will direct and use your tax money, whether you say something or not. So here's the opportunity to advocate for such. I think I'll close on that note, Lennox. We want a motion against that. That being said, it's 6:47 p.m. 7:47 p.m.
Daylight savings time.
For now.
Great job.
Have to do roll.
I didn't see anybody leave.
I got here.
Would you like to do a roll call?
Dan Brehan. Present. Kenneth Crouch. Present. Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Anise Foster Hernandez.
Present.
Pascal Hanlon. President. Bill Jones.
Present.
Nilsa Rama.
Present.
Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Eric Stampone.
Present.
Benny Torres.
Present.
Jason Villanova.
Present.
Candy Vivas Baston.
Present.
Oh my God, is everyone here?
Wow.
Yeah.